Third child was born at 22 weeks, now suffers in the hospital on a ventilator, and we're barely holding on. In September, my wife and I found out that we were pregnant with our third child. We were excited as this would be the one that completed our family. In November of 2023 on Thanksgiving Day I felt very sick and we ended up going to the ER, which I don't ever go to because I work as a firefighter/paramedic and only typically go if it's a true emergency. I just progressively got worse and worse and began having trouble breathing, and so we went. My wife, 2 kids, aged 3 and 4 at the time, and I all tested positive for influenza A. We went home and fought through it for 3 to 4 days. On the 5th day my wife woke me up screaming and I looked over and the entire bed was covered in blood. We went straight to the ER and were told that she had a hematoma on her placenta and that it would heal on its own and not to worry. Fast forward 3 months and a ton of doctor appointments for the non-stop bleeding, and it finally came up that my wife had a marginal placental separation that could lead to a placenta abruption. In February 2024, at just 21 weeks pregnant, my wife's water broke and she was admitted to the hospital and eventually gave birth via cesarean section at 22 weeks and 2 days. My baby boy weighed 1 pound 4 ounces at birth and was only 11 3/4 inches long. We spent 176 days in the NICU and had a relatively easy stay considering the hurdles he had to go through. We eventually went home with a feeding tube, some oxygen and nebulizer. In January of 2025, my son got sick with human metapneumovirus and RSV. We have been in the hospital now for 105 days and I feel like I failed my son. I feel like I am slowly watching my son die. It is the most gut-wrenching feeling I have ever experienced. My family's life revolves around going to the hospital daily. I am fortunate to have enough passive income to sustain our lives, but I have not worked in the past 14 months. My wife has not worked in the past 18 months. We have had to move to a home closer to the hospital because our home is 2 hours from the hospital. I now have my home 2 hours away and rent a house that is 20 minutes from the hospital. My son has a tracheostomy and is on a ventilator. He has a Broviac catheter in his chest to have permanent access to his vascular system. He has a GJ tube in his belly to give feeds and oral medications. My wife's life revolves around being bedside with our baby. I take care of the other 2 kids. Our entire relationship revolves around research on our son, talking to doctors daily, trying to come up with a plan to make some form of progress. Right now my son lives on a ventilator. He is asleep most of the days and nights because of sedation. He has suffered multiple broken bones from osteoporosis due to heavy steroid use. Prior to going to the hospital my son was a ball of joy. He smiled, laughed, he never cried, and was the most content baby that I have ever been around. Now he barely smiles. He does when we sit there and talk with him, but no random smiles or laughs. We cannot even hold our son. I'd quit. I expect after all he was born at 22 weeks, but this is not what I expected. I can't sleep. I cry nightly and get random bouts of depression. I know what it feels like. I suffered from severe PTSD from the military and fought for years to get to a better mental state. I feel myself slipping into the darkness again and I don't think there is a fix for this one. I don't know if my son will ever leave the hospital. I am normally a very optimistic person, and having worked EMS I have seen miracles, and now I sit on my knees begging the Lord to make this right. I'm just lost and scared that if my son does go it will destroy me and my wife. For now I just bury my feelings because if I break then my family breaks. I am the patriarch of our family and I know that if I stay strong so will they. It's just so damn hard sometimes. Update 1. Good afternoon everyone. My last post blew up and went viral. I did not intend for that to happen. I just came here to vent and get some stuff off my chest. I am beyond grateful for the amount of people who took the time to view, comment, message me, and especially those who took the time to read my son's full story on our crowdfunding site. I did not intend to upset anyone and I have tried to keep up with reading all the comments that were on my original post. I decided to take the time to update everyone here with a new post. I cannot edit my other post due to it having images. I went to my appointment today and everything went very well. I also was able to sit down with my pastor as a family and we spoke for a while. My family and especially my state of mind is in a much better place thanks to all of the heartwarming responses from many of you. My son is also doing well. We had some hiccups shortly after making my original post that lead to Bentley needing 100% oxygen for around 24 to 30 hours because of a lung collapse, but he was able to recover and is doing better now. I will continue to edit this post so that everyone can get updates. I also update our GoFundMe and Facebook regularly, if you would prefer to follow those instead. I also want everyone to know that my DMs are always open if you ever want an update. I am as transparent as they come and if I can answer any questions I will. He tolerated the surgery well, but the outcome was worse than what we anticipated. Once the surgeon was able to get the contrast dye in the eyes and was able to see it under imaging, she stated it was much worse in both eyes than she could have anticipated. She did a lot of lasering, 2 hours worth, and 2 new injections, 1 in each eye. She said that she also did an eye exam for glasses while she was there and that he is extremely nearsighted. He can only see maybe 2 to 5 inches in from of his face. She said that the nearsightedness can be somewhat corrected with glasses, so we will be buying those this week. She said that even with the amount of laser and the injections that she said he will eventually become totally blind. It is just a matter of time. She said that she has only seen one similar case with the disease as bad as his and that child unfortunately did not live through his hospital stay. We also have a world-leading expert from Miami that specializes in ROP retinopathy of prematurity and our surgeon's mentor on his case, and she agrees with what our surgeon has stated. There is nothing further that they can do to protect the eyes and that they will continue to monitor from here on out. Update 2. A few weeks ago I had posted in here for help with my son who is in the hospital PICU. I just wanted to give an update since it has been a while since I last updated. Bentley's lungs have began the healing process and they have been able to wean a bunch of his medications. He is on a maintenance dose of steroids now and is on very low levels of sedation, just to help with some pain. His zoledronic acid infusions have began to help his bones absorb the calcium they need to get stronger. He is still on a ventilator but his settings are beginning to look better. We were told we have at least another 3 to 5 months because of how weak he has become while in and out of sedation and paralytics during his time fighting against his virus. Bentley had to have surgery last week for his eyes, due to the retinopathy of prematurity recurring in his right eye and getting worse in his left eye. During the procedure the surgeon placed eye contrast and took images for another world-leading specialist in ROP out of Miami. It was determined that Bentley's ROP is one of the worst cases that either surgeon has seen in their careers. They did 3 hours of laser eye surgery to try to slow and stop the disease from being active. They both have told us that Bentley will eventually go blind, total blindness. They said they did as much as they could and even gave a new injection, Eylea, to try and help. They also did an eye exam and said that Bentley can see focused images at about 2 to 5 inches from his face right now and wrote a prescription for glasses. Overall, Bentley's lungs are getting better, as are some of the systemic problems that occurred from trying to keep him alive during his fight. While he will be on many medications and a ventilator for some time moving forward, we are grateful that he won his fight against the virus. As with all fights, there are scars that we carry from them, and one of the lasting scars from Bentley's recent bout with the virus will be his eyes. We don't know when, but we know he will be blind at some point in his life. This news was hard at first and we, Mom and I, both cried over this news. But we know he will get through this and so shall we. We still have 3 to 5 months of physical and occupational therapy to try and get Bentley stronger and at a state of care that is manageable at home. Update 3. Bentley has been struggling the last week or so. He ended up back on nitric oxide due to pulmonary hypertension. He needed some more sedation during this time and they had to increase his steroids. We have been told by the doctors, during a care meeting, that we should not expect to leave the hospital before the first of the new year. This will put our total time in the PICU close to 1 year. While I sit here and try to wrap my head around that, I know that this pain I feel is only temporary. I continue to give updates on Bentley but have not really gone into me and my feelings on the matter. After my initial post I scheduled an appointment for a grief counselor. During that time I spoke to a therapist and he determined that I could possibly benefit from talk therapy as well as medication changes. However, I had to go to another appointment to start both of those. The next available appointment is not until the end of June, which kind of leaves me in limbo until then. I've been in a much better headspace since my initial post, and the things that I was depriving myself of, personal hygiene, fitness, appetite, have improved since the amount of love and support this community has shown me. Even with the news that Bentley will more than likely be blind growing up, and him having some difficulties, have not been able to knock me back down. However, with the news that there is very little chance of my son leaving the hospital until the end of the year going into next year has brought my world crashing back down, to reality I suppose. We continue to make life changes to try and improve my son's life. We have moved closer to the hospital. We have taken the time off of work to be there every single day. We continue to be there for our other children, and still this is all consuming. We find little time for ourselves and we still revolve our lives around the hospital. My oldest son, 6, has epilepsy and autism. We thought the epilepsy was under control, 15 months with no seizures. However, on Sunday, as we were getting ready for church, Peyton had a seizure that sent us to the hospital for him. They did some med changes and hopefully that will keep those under control. I hate coming on here and expressing my feelings. I just am able to articulate it better in a written form than I can verbally. I talk to my wife and she understands to some extent what I am going through, but at the end of the day she is grieving as well, and it is hard to burden her with my pain while she tries to cope with hers. Update 4. I've been meaning to write an update, but every time I sit down and try to find the words, it all feels too big, like there are just too many threads to pull at once. But this past week deserves an update, because things got, well, crazy, in ways that are both terrifying and, strangely, maybe a little bit hopeful. First, Bentley. For the first time in months, we had a week that wasn't dominated by a single disaster but by 1,000 tiny, uncertain steps. After another hellish round with pulmonary hypertension, the team decided to try him on a new medication, one they don't usually use this young or with this much complexity, but it's shown promise in some European studies with micropremies. That came with a million warnings and disclaimers, but we felt like we had nothing left to lose. Strangely, it seems to be helping. His oxygen requirements have dropped the tiniest bit, and his numbers have been less unpredictable. His doctors call it meaningful movement. I'm not naive enough to start talking about turning a corner, but seeing those little numbers decrease and hearing his nurse say he's less stormy today, it almost made us giddy. For the first time since his last sedation increase, we've had moments during the day when he's not only awake, but actually alert. He can't cry, but he makes this faint, gurgling coo now that the speech pathologist says might be his way of communicating. The other night, he was listening to his sister tell a story and he reached for her hand. His hand is so tiny, still, frail from the steroids and the months of inactivity, but it's his hand, and he reached. I didn't cry then because I didn't want to scare my daughter, but when she left the room I broke down. We had another set of consults, and I have to say, I think we've met every retinopathy specialist in the tri-state area. The Miami doctor finally flew in to meet Bentley and see him herself. It was surreal to have someone so famous in the world of micropremi eye care sitting in the PED's ICU, talking to us like we were old friends. She confirmed, Bentley will lose the rest of what little sight he has, most likely before his 5th birthday. But she also said, he's here. That's everything. She has a son born at 25 weeks, now graduating college. She told us, don't believe all the statistics. Look at your child, not the chart. My oldest, Peyton, for a while we thought the med change was helping, but then came 2 seizures in 1 week, one while we were all sitting watching Bluey in the hospital rec room and one right after his therapy appointment. Luckily, both were less severe, no intubation, but enough to turn my world into static again. His neurologist increased his meds again, but Peyton hates taking them. Now he asks me, Daddy, when am I going to be better? And it just crushes me. Family, I had a moment this week that I'm almost embarrassed to share. My wife and I snuck away for an hour, just an hour, at a coffee shop around the corner from the hospital. Bentley's nurse was insistent. Go. You need it. For 30 minutes we didn't talk about doctors or oxygen or medications. We sat in silence, drinking coffee so strong it made my hands shake, and just listened to the world going by. On the walk back, my wife squeezed my hand and started crying, right there on the sidewalk, and said, I forgot how to not be scared. Me too. But for a few minutes, I remembered what it was like to just be us. Long story short, Bentley is stable, maybe a little improved, but we are still in the thick of it. We've had some hope, yes, but also new consultants warning us that the path ahead is long, uncharted, and, frankly, brutal. He might need another round of bone infusions for the fractures in his legs. His calcium doesn't absorb at all without them. Physical therapy is coming in every single day now, working on passive range of motion. I watched him try to push a tiny stuffed animal with his left hand, and for the first time the PT said, that's a voluntary movement. That's the kind of phrase that makes you absurdly happy around here. The social worker at the hospital is helping us with the plans for long-term home ventilation, maybe by next spring, but they are brutally honest, he is going to need 24-hour care for the foreseeable future. Both parents. No return to work in sight. We've started to talk about what our new normal actually is, not in the abstract, but in the day-to-day. I had to have the talk with my parents about selling our old house, and while they try to be supportive, I see the fear in their faces. Yesterday, some of Bentley's former nurses from the NICU stopped by with a banner they'd made for him. All these pictures and little notes like keep fighting, little man, and I finally saw my wife smile without it being forced or painted on. It was the first time I'd seen her really, truly smile in months. I guess that's what I keep coming back to. Every single day is exhausting. I'm still waiting for my therapy appointment, and I'm still dog paddling to keep my head above the sadness. But for the first time since the spiral started, it feels like we are inching, cautiously, towards something resembling possibility. Not hope for miracles, not expectations for a normal life, but a kind of stubborn joy, even in the face of grief. We have further vision appointments, neurologist visits, and rounds with the palliative team scheduled for next week. It feels like running a marathon with no finish line, but I'm still running, and for today, Bentley's still here, smiling his half smile at his sister, squeezing my finger, refusing to give up. Update 5. It's hard to explain what the last month has felt like. Days are measured in milligrams and milliliters, in nurses' shifts and therapy rounds and fleeting minutes of sun that filter through PICU windows. Weeks seem to collapse in on themselves, Bentley's good days wrapped in the silence and waiting of barely bad ones. It's like treading water in the middle of an ocean, not really moving forward but not sinking either. But somehow, over the last few weeks, the current shifted, and new, unexpected things are happening. Even as I type this, I still have trouble believing half of it. First, the medical stuff, because that's the backbone of every day. 3 weeks ago Bentley spiked a fever, out of nowhere, high and fast. That familiar, sickening lurch set in, infection, maybe sepsis. We braced for another spiral, and the team started antibiotics before the cultures even came back. But, shockingly, it wasn't another pneumonia, or a line infection, or anything like what we've all come to dread. An odd, rare bacteria, usually harmless, had colonized his Broviac. I'll spare you the details, but for once, things actually went right. The first-line antibiotic brought it right down without complications, and the infectious disease team was practically jubilant as they signed off his chart. I realized I hadn't heard a nurse say uncomplicated recovery in a year. But the real day-to-day difference, Bentley is awake now, more often than not, and more present. There's this precious, bright little alertness about him. He can't make sounds, Trot Tube makes sure of that, but now when his brother or sister comes into the room, his whole face lights up. We discovered, almost accidentally, that he loves music, particularly Taylor Swift, don't ask me why. A volunteer was playing acoustic guitar in the unit and as soon as the first chord rang out, Bentley waved his hand in the air, tiny, jerky, but purposeful. The music therapist started coming twice a week, and now, if you even hum Shake It Off, he'll fuss until you finish the song. His PT team calls this increased responsiveness. What I call it is a glimpse of who my son is when he's not fighting so hard just to exist. A wild, bittersweet development. The ophthalmologist team finished serial testing on his vision, and the latest scans showed what they called unexpected stabilization. The disease didn't reverse, and there's still scarring, but the rapid monthly decline seemed to pause since the last surgery and injections. The famous Miami doctor read the case herself and called it baffling, but positive. They won't promise anything, of course, they almost never do, but now they're saying he might keep that 2-inch window of blurry sight longer than they thought. Maybe months. Maybe years. The uncertainty gnaws at us, but for a family that has been fed bad news for breakfast for almost a year, not worse, not yet, feels almost revolutionary. Last week, something else I never expected. Child Life organized a day of wheels on the unit, dozens of decorated wagons, scooters, wheelchairs, even ride-ons for kids mobile enough. I hadn't wanted to go. Public celebrations make me deeply anxious now, too much staring, too much opportunity for sadness to bubble up or the logistics of tubes and vents to overwhelm. But Bentley's PT team insisted. So for the first time since his birth, we took him into the hallway, trailing wires and pumps and O2 tanks. They rigged a wagon with foam padding, propped up his ventilator, looped his trot tube over his shoulder. My daughter picked an orange streamer and wrapped it around the handle. There were about 20 feet between his room and the end of the hallway, and it took us half an hour to make it that far, cheering him on breath by breath. People, nurses off shift, other parents, lined the ward, clapping. My wife sobbed openly. Bentley, for 10 minutes, was not the critical case or the baby on the vent. He was just a kid in a wagon, blinking at the world, hand brushing a paper streamer, basking in the sounds. On the way back, a toddler with cancer reached over and held his foot. I swear, something in the way he blew a puff of air out seemed just like a giggle. Of course, not everything is storybook. Peyton, my oldest, had another seizure, the third in 4 weeks. This one was fierce enough to land him overnight on the neurology floor. My wife and I had to split up, her with Peyton, me in the PICU, bent over Bentley's wagon, phone buzzing from hospital updates and financial reminders. But something shifted for us, too. In the exhaustion, we started to talk again about the future, not just the next crisis. My wife started making art again, just tiny watercolors on hospital notepaper, but she let our daughter pick the colors. I enrolled in a late-night Zoom class for parents of kids with complex care medical needs. At 1 a.m., I sat in a dark bedroom and listened as other parents recounted their own battlefields, nights with monitors, years in hospitals, the horror and the stubborn, ordinary love. I cried, but it didn't feel like breaking down as much as being rebuilt. The social worker started something called discharge planning. Officially, tentatively, it'll be months and months before home is possible, maybe, impossibly, by next summer. The first nurse-led home care company came in with information folders. The respiratory therapists brought sample equipment, tiny home vents, portable monitors, bags I'll need to learn to assemble in my sleep. For now, it's in exploration mode, no promises. We're still talking about keeping him stable, building up bone density, another round of zoledronic acid is scheduled, and they have splints ready for more fractures if he wriggles too much. But someday isn't never. Someday is on the table now, and the therapists are teaching us ways to play that don't just pass the time, but build muscles for that eventual day. There was one more surreal moment last week, a letter from a family whose preemie survived long-term vent support at our hospital 4 years ago. They'd heard about Bentley and sent photos, stories, a note that said, "It's possible to live joyfully even when nothing is the way you planned." My wife tacked it up over Bentley's crib, next to all the hospital bracelets he's outgrown. I don't want to sugarcoat it. There are still nights where I lie awake worrying about everything from Medicaid paperwork to the tension in my wife's voice or my daughter's nightmares. But for the first time in this endless, wrenching fight, I can see tiny cracks in the darkness where light is leaking in. Not all the way, maybe not ever all the way, but enough to see our baby boy as more than his diagnoses, enough to see a version of life where his laugh, or a puff of air that means laughter, might echo in our home. Update 6. I'll start with Bentley, because he's still the star burning at the center of all this. Against every projection, he's stable. Not improving, not in the miraculous sense, but holding his ground. His numbers have been eerily consistent, oxygen needs holding at 50%, ventilator settings the same for 3 weeks straight. When you spend this long in critical care, stable feels like a win. And he's awake, really awake, more than ever. He tracks faces now, mine, my wife's, his siblings when they come by. The therapists say he's starting to anticipate routines, widening his eyes when he hears the beeping of his feeding pump, reaching for his pink elephant rattle at PT. Even the tiniest habits matter. He's forming a rhythm to his days. He's starting to roll ever so slightly to his left side, with help and lots of pillows, and yesterday, for the very first time, he brought his left hand to his mouth and gnawed on his knuckle. The PT team nearly fainted. We all did. The hand-to-mouth reflex is something he should have developed back in the NICU, but his bones had always been too fragile, his muscles too slack. Now, with new splints, blue, this time, he chose with a sideways glance at the pile of Velcro straps, and the latest round of zoledronic acid. His bones are harder. He fusses when the PT stops before he's ready. Sometimes it's hard to believe this is the same baby whose lungs once collapsed 3 times in 2 months. The wildest twist, I'm learning to take Bentley on walks. Not outside, not yet, they keep telling me, not yet, but through the long, echoing hospital corridors. COVID restrictions have eased, so we rig up his medical stroller with all the gear and glide him past the nurse's station. He stares at the lights on the ceiling, wide-eyed, like he's watching the stars. The other day, we rolled past the window to the hospital rooftop garden. It was dusk, orange sky, pink clouds, and for a long moment, he just looked. I told him about clouds, about sunsets, about gardens and wind in your hair. He can't answer, but he blew 2 faint puffs of air, his sign for more. The music therapist, Sarah, has started calling him her smallest Swiftie. Now she brings her little ukulele and sings You Belong With Me. Bentley likes the chorus. There's something about the chord progression that makes his hand twitch in rhythm, almost like he's trying to conduct. The nurses all laugh, and even families passing by slow down to listen. I never thought I'd find something joyful in a PICU hallway, but here we are. The vision team brought bittersweet news. His sight is still limited, but the rapid decline the surgeons predicted in the spring has slowed. Whether it's the drugs, prayers, or just luck, nobody knows. The consensus is still that total blindness is probable, but for now he can focus on faces, bright colors, big soft shapes. His glasses, tiny, round, cobalt blue, make him look like an old soul. His sister jokes he's mini Harry Potter, and for a second, he smiles the way he used to, slow, lopsided, completely himself. New challenges, always. Last week, Bentley's Broviac line clotted. We spent 2 days with alarms going off every hour, flushes that wouldn't draw, the nightmare of potentially losing deep vascular access. I sat next to his bed on the second night, hands shaking, while 2 residents fumbled to restart the 4th and his nurse kept whispering, "Come on, little man, work with us." It ended well. Interventional radiology managed to salvage the line and avoided a surgical replacement, but the fear stayed with me for days. There's no prepping for these moments. There's only surviving them. Family is a new balancing act every week. Peyton's seizures are less frequent, after another med adjustment, and, weirdly, switching up his sleep schedule. The last one was milder, no hospital, just a bruised ego and an ice pack. He's obsessed with learning to make grilled cheese, so now we have a new ritual. Sunday lunches at the hospital kitchenette with rubber spatula, bread, and enough American cheese to feed a small army. My daughter draws comics of Super Bentley with blue hair and laser eyes. She leaves them taped to the boards in his room. I laughed so hard at one panel, Bentley, flying over the city, yanking the trot tube like a grappling hook, that the nurse came in to check on us. My wife, I can tell the toll is showing. She's lost weight, her hair is thinner, but some days I catch her painting again. She started meeting with a parent support group every Wednesday in the hospital's family lounge, bringing her little watercolors and sharing supplies with 2 other moms. One night, I found her and her new friend, whose daughter is nonverbal, also chronically critical, laughing so hard I thought they'd wake every patient on the ward. I realized in that moment that she was healing, too, inch by inch. As for me, therapy finally started, Zoom at first, then in person, with a counselor who specializes in post-ICU family trauma. The first 2 sessions I mostly cried. The third, I ranted about the feeling of being stuck in amber, how everyone else's life moves forward, jobs and birthdays and school plays, and mine is still lived in 5-minute hospital increments. My therapist listened. Then she said one thing I keep replaying: you're not failing. You're adapting. There's grief, but there's also growth. The biggest development, one I almost can't believe as I type it, we have a realistic discharge date. They're planning, not promising, but early next year, if all stays steady, we might bring Bentley home. It will mean 24-hour nursing, equipment stacked floor to ceiling, new routines, a house that looks more like an ICU than a nursery. We had our first home care team meeting, and there were 16 people on the call. Respiratory, PT, OT, case managers, supply coordinators, even a child psychologist for siblings. I don't know how real it is, but for the first time, someone let me say when he comes home instead of if. We'll need another bone infusion, more blood work, and his vision could disappear at any time. But he's here. He's alive. He's waving his small hand at his mother's watercolors. Some days, I even feel like he's trying to hum along with You Belong With Me. Last night, after a long, hard day, Broviac flushing, insurance arguments, tense silence in the car, I wheeled Bentley down the nighttime ward. The halls were quiet. A nurse stood at the window, watching the city lights. I looked at my son, all tubes and sensors and little blue glasses, and for a moment, everything went still. I thought about how much we've lost, and how impossibly much we've gained, how the world has gotten smaller, but our love for this tiny, fierce kid has gotten bigger than I ever thought possible. We're not out. Not even close. But life, real life, keeps happening, even inside the glare of hospital lights. Tomorrow, my daughter will bring crayons. Peyton will grumble about grilled cheese. My wife will paint a new sky. And Bentley, maybe, will roll again onto his left side and reach for my finger, holding on. And I will keep walking beside him, one impossible step at a time.